Hi, this is Faraday from AresMush, and this is part 3 of the Editing Ares Code tutorial. In this segment, we'll look at how to use GitHub to manage our source code and easily transfer our changes from our PC to the game server. Source control is a cornerstone of software development. It's what the pros do, and with just a little bit of practice, it can be what you do too. GitHub is a free, cloud-based source control system used by millions of developers worldwide. Here's the basic idea. First, we're going to clone or download a copy of the code from GitHub. Next, we're going to change the code on our local PC. Once we're done making changes, we're going to push those changes back to GitHub, and then we're going to pull the changes from GitHub to our game server. Now you may be wondering what you have to gain by using GitHub as a middleman. Isn't it easier just to upload directly from the game instead of going through GitHub? Well, there are lots of benefits of source control. Here are just a few. GitHub will essentially serve as a cloud backup of your code, so you can never lose anything. It will track your local changes and only upload what you changed, which is far more efficient than FTP. It'll maintain a history of your changes and even show you the individual file differences, which helps you track down problems and revert to prior versions. Another big advantage of source control is collaboration. You can coordinate multiple coders and grab patches and updates from the main AresMush code far more easily than using direct editing or FTP. Now to use GitHub, first you'll need to create an account. Then you'll need to create your own version, which they call a fork of the AresMush code. This basically creates a parallel repository under your own account where you'll be able to store your code changes for your game. To set up a fork, log into your account and go to the AresMush code repository. You can find a link there on aresmush.com under source code. Click the fork button to create your own fork. Be sure to do this for both the main game and the web portal because you're going to need both. To work with the code on our PC, we'll need to clone it from GitHub. The easiest way to do that is to use GitHub Desktop, which is available for Mac and Windows. Once we've installed it, we can log in with our GitHub account and then click Clone a Repository. Select your AresMush fork and choose a local directory to store the code in. Then we're going to do the same for the Ares web portal fork. Now that we have the files on our hard drive, we can edit them using our favorite code editor, just like we saw in the FTP upload tutorial. If we look in GitHub Desktop, we'll see that it actually tracks the files that we've changed. We can click on an individual file and it'll show us exactly what we did, line by line. These changes, though, are still local to our PC. To get them up to GitHub, it takes two steps. First, we have to do a commit, which basically locks in our changes with a message saying what we did. And then we need to do a push to push those changes up to GitHub. So if we do those two things and then go to GitHub and refresh the page, we'll see the commit that we just made. So now we've got the code in GitHub, but how do we get it to the game itself? As long as we haven't made any direct edits on the game server, shell, or FTP uploads, it's actually pretty easy. We just need to log into the game with a coder character and type git pull. And we'll see that one file was changed and we've got the latest code. Now, just like in the other tutorials, whenever we get the code manually, we need to reload it. And we can use load all if we're not really sure exactly what we changed. But in this case, we know that all we loaded, or all we need to load, is the Tinker file. Now it's possible, particularly if you've done any code editing directly on the server shell or through FTP upload, that when you do a git pull, you'll get a message like this where it says conflict. A merge conflict happens when two people change the same file in a way that GitHub can't sort out automatically. And in this case, it basically means that we changed the file on the game server directly and somebody pushed a change to that same file into GitHub. So to resolve this, we have to go to our server shell, change into the AresMush directory, and we don't have GitHub desktop on here because it doesn't run on a command line, so we just have to use the regular git commands. So we can type git status, and it'll list the conflict file here, and then we can use the nano command line editor to change it. And we see these funny markers. This is where the merge conflict occurred. Basically, this version here, where it says head, that's the version we had on the game server. And this version here is the version that somebody pushed to GitHub. Now, we have to choose how we want the code to look when all is said and done. We could decide to take this version, or we could decide to keep this version, or we could try to stitch them together into a single unified version. In this case, we're actually going to just get rid of these test comments and just leave the emit. Now we can load the code and test it out, make sure it works. In order to get that change back to GitHub, we have to do a commit. And again, since we don't have GitHub desktop, we have to do the commit using the command line. The command is commit-am and then a message of what we changed, fixing merge conflict. And then we would push that to get that change back up into GitHub. Now at some point you're going to want to get the latest code from the main AresMush repository so that you have all the latest features and bug fixes in your own game that exist in the latest AresMush release. It's recommended that you do this operation every time there's a code release announced for AresMush, which you can find out about through either the forum or the Facebook page. Just trust me on this one, doing smaller frequent updates is going to be way easier for you than waiting for ages and then trying to do some massive update from version 1 to version 4. The way we do an update is a GitHub operation called an upstream pull. Now upstream is just a fancy word for the place that you forked from. When you created your AresMush repository, it was a fork from the main AresMush repository, so that's your upstream. And pull is because it's the same basic operation that we do when we pull the code from GitHub into our game server, except in this case we're pulling from a different place in GitHub, the main AresMush repository, into our local PC. Now I can't show you the upstream pull operation using my AresMush repository because you need to have a fork, and my AresMush code isn't a fork, it's the original. But I do have another repository here that I can use for demonstration. Now even though it's a different code base, the commands that I'm going to show you are exactly the same commands that you'll use when updating your Ares code. Now normally we start off in the changes area here, but to do the upstream pull, we need to go over to the history area. We select a branch to compare, and the one we're looking for, there may be multiple listed, but the one we want is called upstream master. And when we do that, we'll see that there are 217 commits that are in the upstream code that we don't have yet. Now we want them. In order to get them, we click this Merge into Master button, and that will pull down all of those commits into our local copy. So just click that, and bam, we're done. Now, it didn't happen this time, but it is possible if you changed a file that I also changed in the main Ares code, that you would get a notice here that says that there is a merge conflict. And just like we saw in the previous example, that just means that you need to open up that file in your favorite text editor and on your local PC and look for those funny merge markers and figure out which version you want to keep. Do you want to keep your version, or do you want to keep my version, or do you want to somehow stitch them together into a combined version? Once you've done all that, you just do one final push to GitHub, and now everything is in sync. And you can pull the latest changes over to your game so that you'll have all of your code plus all the latest Aries code. So that covers all the basic things you need to know to use GitHub to manage your source code. GitHub is the best way to transfer code between your PC and the game server. Now, there's still one more thing that we can do to improve our development workflow, because we still don't know if the code actually works before we are putting it on our real game. And that's not ideal. So in the next segment, we're going to look at different options for setting up a separate game that you can use for your development, and that way you can test your code before you upload it to your real game. For now though, that concludes this part of the tutorial. Thanks for listening.